Mark Moldre is a singer-songwriter from northern New South Wales. He fronted four-piece Hitchcock's Regret for a 7-year period and recorded his first solo release in 2009. His latest album is Nambucca Fables, which combines melodic Americana and indie pop rock. And that's just a really short summary of what it is, because it is like this epic, magical, layered piece of work that I've listened to many, many times, and I intend to listen to many more times. Hello, Mark.
G'day, Sophie. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. We're going to talk about this album, which is really thoughtful and thought-provoking, but I'm going to start by saying that the album is named for Nambucca Heads, which is where your late mother grew up. And
Yeah.
the album was written after her death. But I'm wondering about your personal experiences of Nambucca Heads and what your memories are.
Family holidays mostly.
Right.
So yeah, that my grandparents stayed in Nambucca Heads, and as a kid, we'd have our yearly holiday, which would, generally be to go and visit the grandparents. So most of my memories of Nambucca Heads are mum with her parents, and the little, they had some chooks in the backyard, and they had a loud screeching, swearing cockatoo in the back garden. And I've just got little fragments of memories that I guess, when I was writing the record, that I started trying to remember. It's funny, memories that far back. Mm-hmm. They don't stick the way you think they maybe have, and when you start trying to chase them, you realize they're actually probably pretty hard to gather sometimes. So yeah, I've got lots of memories, but they're weird. They're like tiny little things, the smell of bread in the kitchen, or their kitchen dresser, or the big table that they had because they had a family of 10 kids. Right. So it's just kind of little fragments that I sort of had to piece together.
And did you feel that your mother's upbringing there had been so significant in terms of shaping her as a person that was the reason to go back to that place, or it was more just in honor of her that it was Nambucca Fables?
A few little things happened. I mean, one thing is Mum left Nambucca Heads when she was really young. She left when she was about 15 because she was looking to go to the city. She didn't like living in the country, and they were poor, and I think there was part of it was that Mum wanted to escape her upbringing almost. Mm-hmm. Go and start a fresh life in the city. The other reason was when Mum was in hospital and she was, they were pumped her full of morphine and drugs and things. She started to talk a lot about her history, right, and lots of stories that I hadn't heard before. And Mum talked. There was one particular night. It was about 2 a.m, and she just started telling me almost her whole history right up to meeting my dad.
Wow.
And we in my family, we hadn't really talked about that stuff much. It was great for me to hear lots of stories from Mum. I think that was maybe the catalyst for starting to think about Nambucca Heads. It was probably that night.
Right. And I suppose it was bittersweet as well, that the reason why all that got unlocked was morphine, and that's a disinhibitor for people. So all of those stories that your mother had locked inside her for all those years.
Yeah, it's true. And I was lucky when Mum passed away. I found in Mum's drawers, we were going through all her belongings with my dad, and we actually found 4 sheets of paper. And on the 4 sheets of paper, Mum had written like bullet points of memories from her childhood, and it wasn't something she'd done recently. She'd done it maybe 5 or 6 years before. Mm-hmm. Maybe even more than that. I think it was like Mum not wanting to forget little things about her childhood. Right. And it was like really bizarre little things, like remembering going to the local corner store and waiting while they cut the potatoes to make the hot chips, and just the night that they turned the street lights on in Nambucca Heads for the first time after installing them in her street. Right. Little places where they used to play as kids, and throwing Jaffas in the movie theater, and all of those sort of stories. So those little kind of 4 pages was just 2-liners. Mm-hmm. It was kind of great. That and the night of talking with Mum became all the beginning of the ideas for the songs, I think.
So she was obviously a recorder of detail, just in keeping those bullet pointed lists. And in these songs, you have a lot of detail. That's part of what makes the song so rich for the listener. So I'm wondering if she taught you to pay attention to details.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I've probably always been a little bit like that. And I've always kept little journals and diaries and written things down. And I'm pretty sentimental when it comes to keeping stuff, as we were talking about before we started, just records and CDs and books and magazines and stuff that I just can't. I'm a bit of a mad collector, not like a hoarder. I still get rid of stuff when I feel like I've got no purpose for it anymore. But if there's any kind of sentiment attached to something, I find it really hard, and I do end up, collecting stuff.
So therefore, I'm wondering, in your process of choosing which memories to record on this album, because as you said, your mother told you a lot, she had those recorded, you had your own memories of Nambucca Heads. I'm wondering how you went about selecting just the right stories to tell for the album.
That was hard. I mean, I did go through those notes of Mum's, and I did pick particular lines that stood out to me. Like there's a song on there called I Saw You Last Night, and that starts with the line about the 1958 when the streetlights all came on. So there were things that really jumped out at me. There was a lot more that I wanted to get in there. A lot of it, I think, was also based around my thoughts and feelings and dreams that I'd had at the time and everything. And I know I didn't want to get too direct with the storytelling, probably because I think I'm not very good at it. There are some people who are really good at being storytellers and telling a story from start to finish. Whereas I think maybe I tended to do it in more of a dreamy kind of way. So there were lines that stood out to me, and then I started, working out where things were going to go. Because I didn't want to be too direct, I guess. I didn't want to make it too sentimental or too straight ahead or too much of a guy just kind of, writing a Hallmark card. I was concerned that that's how it would come out. And I think it took me a long time to get past that.
Well, that particular song is the one that's haunting me at the moment, in a good way. But it does. Yeah. I'll leave it at that. But I will also say, when you said that you don't think you're a very good storyteller, I'm wondering if you just mean sort of traditional arc of beginning, middle, and end, as opposed to maybe delivering the story in the middle and paying the reader the compliment of being able to figure out the beginning and the end. Okay, well,
that I love, and I guess that's how I am with movies and books and all kinds of things. There's an author that I really love. I never know how to say his name. Ishiro Kishima. It's gone.
Ishiguro?
Yeah, the guy who wrote Remains of the Day.
Yes.
Kazuo Ishiguro, I think. He does that a lot, where it's so dreamy that you almost don't know, is this the end? Is this the beginning? Am I lost in? I kind of really enjoy that. And maybe not knowing where I am in the story sometimes. Yeah.
Remains of the Day was like that, and so was Never Let Me Go, if you've read that one of his.
Yeah, and there's one called The Unconsoled. And that one from start to finish is just like a dream. You actually never know where you are or even what period of time in the whole story. So I kind of like that.
Yeah, I quite like his writing as well. I actually had trouble with The Unconsoled, but I'm digressing here. We will stay back on music. Did the album start as a way of exploring grief or managing grief?
Managing. Yeah, I think I really, really struggled writing at first, and because I knew why I was doing it. I knew I was getting stuff out, and I think at the time I was saying to everyone, "Oh, I've got really bad writer's block." I don't think I actually did. I think it was more a process that I had to get through to get to the way I actually wanted to write. And I was managing. I was writing at this desk a lot of the time, and nothing good was coming out at all. I just felt like I was writing garbage on the page, and I'd read it and hate it. And I think I called that writer's block, but I was writing lots. Right. It was just that I didn't like anything that I wrote. So I ended up getting out of this room and writing in other places. And then I found that it started to come much easier. And I actually I'd almost written, like, after Mum passed, I wrote letters like I was writing to Mum. And I think I had to get through all of that first, because you're processing so much of your own feelings, and I was getting so much down on paper, but it wasn't the way I wanted to, it wasn't things that I wanted to put into songs. Right. So I had to get all of that out on paper first before I felt like I could start creating something that I felt like was a direction that I wanted to go lyrically.
And it sounds like that's not a process you've been used to in the past with songwriting, that you've had to write stuff out, essentially.
No, no, it had not, a little bit at the end of my last record, maybe I started to struggle a little bit, but before that, it would come really easy.
Right.
You know, this time it was really hard. And there was only one song that was the song that broke the dam, which was called Every Waking Hour. And that was the first song where I actually felt like everything, you know, it's really rare when this happens, but I almost wrote the whole song in one go. And I tried on purpose to write in a much more conversational manner than I'd written before.
Right.
That song felt really good to write. And I think after that, I really went, okay, I know where I'm going now.
Are
Yeah.
there any songs that didn't make it onto the album?
Yeah, there was one that we actually recorded completely. It was called Absolution. Not big, and it didn't make it. It's not that it's not that I didn't like it. It just didn't. I couldn't find a spot to put it.
Right.
We are going to release. I'm doing a single, another single next off from the album next month, and we're releasing that song with it as a B-side. So it'll still make it out there. But there were other songs in my notebooks,
Right.
yeah, which are still sort of filled with bits and pieces that didn't make it even to the band's members' ears.
Right.
But I just ended up keeping to myself. Yeah.
And in the past with songwriting, have you been a self-editor like that, where you've produced more than you need and then made the decision when it came to recording to not record some of them?
Not very often, because I think when I start writing, I'm thinking I'm writing for an album, and I don't just keep writing all the time. I usually start thinking, okay, I'm going to begin the next record, and I start writing, knowing that by the time I get to maybe 11 or 12, I'm done.
Right.
And I find it takes a lot out of me when I do it, and I'm usually kind of a bit relieved when I'm finished. Yeah, so I don't tend to keep going. No, I just sort of go, okay, I've got the songs I like, I'm finished.
Well, given that you read fiction, maybe it's not unlike writing a novel, and that you have that story or the theme or whatever it is for that album in mind, and you set out to construct it, and then once it's the end, it's the end.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. Yeah.
Now, Joan Didion famously wrote about grief as magical thinking, and there is a sense of that on this album, I think. But I'm wondering if you felt like creating the album actually helped you anchor yourself in the here and now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it probably did. The magical thinking part of it for me, I think a lot of it came from dreams. You know, so often the dreams become the inspiration, kind of tied up with all of Mum's memories and everything. But the dreams become sort of the triggers sometimes. But yeah, I think it did anchor me in the here, and it helped me get through whatever, you know, that whole process, which anybody who's kind of dealt with grief knows that dealing with it doesn't happen very quickly, you know, and even after years, you can still be really having a hard time or a struggle, you know, and I think it did help ground me. It helped me get through where I'm able to talk about things now, whereas before I couldn't, you know, and I was worried about that when the album came out. Am I going to be able to discuss this stuff? You know, but I think it has helped in a big way for me.
And grief is also a very intense physical process. So I'm wondering if you noticed if your voice changed at all.
I think my voice is getting lower.
Right.
Yeah, but not that I'd noticed. No. Yeah, but I have noticed my voice is getting lower. I'm probably losing notes off my range. Whether that's got to do with the grief or not, I don't know. The last 2 records I've done, I've sung lower than I had on records before that. That could just be getting old.
Or maybe it's just the notes you're writing. Maybe you're not writing those top notes for yourself anymore.
True.
But now each of these songs has musical layers to them and different elements. And I'm wondering if you work from instinct in thinking about what instruments you're going to use in the song and how, or if you actually start recording, try a few things, and then shift direction if it's not working.
One of the things that I think I'm really lucky with is I've got my band. I've known those guys for a really long time, and we've all got the same musical ear. We all understand each other. One of the things I think, because too, I tend to write in a way that maybe people term as jumping around from genre to genre. The band is what kind of usually pulls it together. I did hear some sounds this time. You know, I was imagining the record was going to be a little bit different to my last 2. But once I started playing them with the band, I let the guys kind of find their way. I don't have really structured, like, you're going to do this, here's the bass line, this is how it's going to go. I let them find their way. And I think that's almost what makes it work. Because I think if I dictated too much, I think the spirit that those guys put into the music would somehow be lost and it would become a bit flat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I kind of really enjoy not going, hey, this is what I hear. These are the instruments that I hear. I love I'm a big second guesser as well. I'm always second guessing myself. So it's nice to have some guys who are around me who we've all got the same kind of taste of musical ear, and and they'll say, nah, I don't reckon that works. And I usually just end up going with it.
Yeah, right.
So I kind of enjoy that.
And one of the people involved in this album is your longtime collaborator, Jamie Hutchings, whom some people may know from Blue Bottle Kiss. And from what I understand, you were childhood friends. And what I'm wondering is, was music part of that childhood friendship?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We all started playing music. Jamie's brother, Scott, is also in the band. He plays drums. And I've known those guys since I was about 5. And one of our first, if you can call it a musical experience, we were all pretty big Beatle nuts when we were little kids, and we used to put on concerts for our parents, sort of singing into vacuum cleaners with tennis rackets and charge them to come and watch us play. You know, stick a bit of cellophane on the light bulb, and we sort of did that a lot. We probably did that up to about age 10. We were still putting on these concerts for our parents. By the time we were old enough to start buying and playing our own instruments, we were in a band together and making a racket, playing lots of cover versions. And then we had a little band called the Fallen Scarecrows where we actually started writing our own songs. And by that time, probably about 16 to 18 years old. Mm-hmm. So yeah, pretty long musical heritage. Plus their dad was probably the person who inspired me to get into jazz. Their dad's a saxophone player, flute player, oboe player, piccolo player. He worked on the midday show for decades. And he's played with everyone from Sinatra to George Benson. Right. So there was a lot of music in their house. You know, you imagine him sort of standing in the corner trying to practice his arpeggios, and you know, Scott and Jamie are blasting out the Celibate Rifles on the other side. It was there was a lot of music there, and it was great. We loved
it. So have you and Jamie ever had musical disagreements, or was your taste always coincided?
No, I'd say Jamie will probably say we've had musical, like, you know, it hasn't always coincided. No, I probably sometimes sit on the softer side of the fence.
Right.
Yeah, Jamie tends to love music that's more abrasive, maybe, than I would listen to sometimes, you know. So between the two, we probably come up with something, especially when we're making my music, that I really start to enjoy, because there are elements of abrasive music that I really, really love. And I think there's elements of softer music that Jamie really loves as well. And Jamie's come around as he's aged. So.
But how lovely for you both to have such a long time collaboration, not just a friendship, but a collaboration.
Yeah, we all got to go to France together as well, which was one of the greatest trips I've ever had, where we went and played a festival over there and a couple of other shows. And to all go as childhood friends. The bass player in my band also was married to Jamie's sister, Sophie. Right. So, you know, we've all known each other such a long time. Adam, who's the slide banjo player, I worked with him in a music store, 20 years ago. So I've known him a really long time too. Mm-hmm. So it's an easy band to be in.
Well, and I imagine they would think that you're providing songs for them that are great for them to work with. So it's an all parts collaboration.
Yeah, we're all in it. We're all having a good time.
Yeah. And those songs are very much about something, you know, they're about experiences, about places, about people. I think about being human. I'm wondering if you've always been interested in that kind of music as a listener.
Yeah, probably. You know, I've always been a listener who's more tuned into lyrics than I am to the music, I would say. Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm really drawn to good lyricists, but probably more than anything else. And that's probably where sometimes me and Jamie go separate ways, because, you know, I'm listening a lot to the words. He does as well. I shouldn't say that because he'll tell me off later. Um, but yeah, I am listening to lyrics, and probably an empathetic listener, So yeah, I am looking for that kind of side of human nature, and feeling like I'm getting to know somebody maybe through their lyrical content. I like it when singer-songwriters are personal, or I know it's become the thing of someone crying in their beer at the bar, but I've always kind of found it brave to be open about feelings and things like that in song, and to be able to stand in front of a room and sing it.
Mm. And I also think it's still quite rare to explore grief through songs, even though it is a universal experience, and there have been so many songs written. For you to have an album that does explore it, but which is ultimately uplifting, I think, and respectful of life, which sounds a bit mundane. That's not how I meant it. And joyous, I think, is also a correct word. So yeah, that's more a comment than a question. But I'm wondering actually now if you have heard many songs that reflect your experience of grief, or is that part of why you wanted to write the album?
Yeah, when I started writing it, I actually went and did a bit of research to work out who had written songs based on grief. There aren't. You're right. There aren't that many, and it made me wonder: am I doing the wrong thing? Do people want to hear this? Is anyone gonna get it except me or my family members, or only people who know me? I did wonder about that, and I did do some research. I think there's a Sufjan Stevens album called Carrie and Lowell. I think it's about his mum and dad. I'm not a big fan of his, but I remember coming across something where it was like, I think he'd written some stories about his mum and dad. Someone who's done it well is Mark Oliver Everett from the Eels. I think it's Mark Oliver Everett. Mr. E, they call him anyway. He's written some very, very direct and almost hard to listen to songs based on the difficulties that he had sort of growing up and in childhood and with loss and all of those kind of things. There wasn't a lot.
And the only one that I can think of is actually Amber Lawrence's recent song, You Were Mine, which is about losing a child. And I remember listening to it thinking, I have never heard a song like this, like with this much naked grief on it. But I think because it's hard, it's hard. What you've done is hard work. It's hard on the soul. I'm sure it was hard physically to write those songs. And now that they're out in the world, does it feel like that's an experience shared, or are people giving you feedback that it's helped them at all?
Yeah, they have actually. I've had quite a few messages. I did a clip for one of the songs called New Suit, and I actually stuck my dad in the end of it. He's just sort of sitting in front of our family home playing a piano accordion as the car's going past, and then I get out of the car and sit next to him, and we're having a chat. It's kind of how the video ends. But it seemed to hit the mark with a lot of people. I kind of thought, no one's going to get that. No one's going to even understand the reference. But I got a lot of messages from people who had experienced loss of their own parents, or had experienced grief. And some of them were people that I talked to even while I was making the record, who even kind of helped me work out how to get my thoughts into focus and all of that kind of stuff. But I did get messages from people who said that they were really moved by the record when they listened. I had one guy message me who said he had memories of Nambucca Heads, and he sat down because he had some history there himself, and he didn't know me at all. We've never met in person, but he said he sat down with a glass of wine, and by the time the record finished, he was in tears. So somehow it's hitting a mark, I think, and I hope so, because I was worried that people weren't going to get it.
I think it definitely hits a mark, and it will no doubt for the audiences at your album launch shows that are coming up. There is one at the Golden Barley in Sydney, which has long had a history of live music, and also at the Lincoln Pin in Woy Woy. Have you played either of those venues before? I'm guessing you have. You haven't. I thought you must have played the Golden Barley in particular. There you go.
No, they're both new venues to me. Right. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. I haven't, I live on the Central Coast, which is why we're playing at the Lincoln Pin.
Right.
And I haven't played there before either. I've been there, but I haven't played there. So yeah, looking forward to both of those.
Yeah, the Lincoln Pin's been doing a very good job with the live music. So
well, we needed it on the coast. There was once we had Lizottes here at one point where I played a lot. Might have played there like 50 times. But it's once that left, there wasn't many places for someone like me singing folk songs and stuff to go and play.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to have somewhere that I can go and take the band and launch the record.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have just been Sydney.
Well, I will put the dates with the interview, and it's been fantastic to talk to you about this wonderful album. I'm so glad that people are giving you feedback that it's hitting the mark, because it certainly has for me. Mark, it's been wonderful to talk to you. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, Sophie. Really appreciate it.